Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kirby Lau from the Fish and Wildlife Commission, and I'm here to talk with you about invasive species right here in Florida. You may have heard about a recently published news article that talked about how landscape corridors, or areas of natural land that connect patches of habitat, can lead to the spread of invasives. While this paper is important to the study of ecology in its own way, I just wanted to clarify some points that it made and highlight some things that make its conclusions fairly circumstantial. You've probably heard about or even seen green iguanas, nutrias, or Cuban tree frogs. All of these species are invasive here in Florida, meaning they do not naturally occur here and they cause harms to the ecosystems there within. The research paper that the previously mentioned news article was based on was actually focused on a different invasive species, the fire ant. In fact, it focused on two different social forms of the invasive fire ant in Florida, the monogene form and the polygene form. It stated that the polygene social form of fire ant, which does not spread well, actually utilized these corridors to help it spread more quickly. Of course, this got people a little bit concerned. It also mentioned that the so-called monogene social form of this fire ant, which disperses very widely and easily, quickly, typical of an invasive species, actually is not affected by the implementation of these corridors. In fact, most invasive species, like the monogene social form of the fire ant that I just mentioned, are really good dispersers. Corridors actually tend to help invasives that aren't very good at dispersing, which is quite rare in reality. While it is good to note that some invasive species which might otherwise have trouble spreading without the presence of corridors are affected and can spread more easily when corridors are there, it is actually more important to note that in the definition of invasive species, one of their defining qualities is that they can spread easily and quickly. Most invasive species can do this whether corridors are present or not. So, even though this paper made some great points and reminds us to be careful and considerate when planning these corridors, the benefits of having them actually outweigh the costs. I know that most people were pretty surprised and confused when they first read this news article. I mean, I sure was, but don't worry. The planning of Florida's wildlife corridors is actually done by professionals in the field who know about all the many benefits of these corridors as well as the occasional drawback. As some of you may know, our Florida corridors look something like this. They help wildlife travel between patches of habitat, like conservation areas or local parks. This is extremely important for wildlife that need continuous habitat in order to survive. These corridors can help create healthy populations of our local animals by enhancing genetic diversity and allowing these animals to move between green spaces without having to enter areas of human development. For example, a group of deer will be much healthier and have a much better chance of survival if it's allowed and able to intermingle and interbreed with other groups of deer within the ecosystem. This additional habitat benefits many endangered and threatened species, like our very own frosted flatwood salamander or red-cockaded woodpecker. They rely on these corridors in order to survive. So in reality, corridors tend to actually increase the number of species in an ecosystem rather than decrease it in most cases. So, even though the research paper made some interesting conclusions about a very specific invasive species, most invasives have no trouble spreading all on their own. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission will certainly take into account species traits when we're planning these corridors, and will carefully weigh both the costs and benefits of implementing them in certain ecosystems before any final decisions are actually made. Alright, I hope this video helped to clear up some things for you guys, and I hope that in the future you'll continue to support all of our wildlife corridor projects. Thanks so much, and I will see you next time.